Just over a year ago, I started my job as a risk analyst for a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. But how exactly did it get here? Well, it certainly didn't happen overnight. In fact, it took me almost 5 years to go from a broke college student working odd jobs to where I am now. And today, I'll be telling you all about that journey, from my humble beginnings working at a warehouse because I couldn't get any internships, to getting my first internships, then working at a large Wall Street bank, and then finally, how I landed at a hedge fund. And I'll try to give you guys as many details as I can fit in this video, in the hopes that if you want to pursue a career in this industry or a similar one, you might get some ideas of what to do, or in some cases what not to do. Or if you're just curious, well, I hope you enjoy the video. My story starts in 2019 during the spring semester of my sophomore year at the University of Connecticut. At this time, I was actually trying to pursue a career in videography and filmmaking. In fact, I had two majors at the time. The first was communications, and the second was finance, because I thought it'd be a good backup. And I thought it'd be cool to dress in a suit, work in a skyscraper. I kid you not, this was my actual thought process, so if you need any evidence that I was a clueless college kid back then, this is one of them. Anyways, needless to say, I had no idea what a hedge fund was or anything to do with the financial markets for that matter. I basically thought a career in finance meant you went to go work for a Fortune 500 company in their finance department or something. But I was in no hurry to learn. I mean, I was in college, I was having a good time, I joined a frat, I was just doing typical college kid things. Then one day, everything changed. There was a dramatic change in my family's circumstances that left me in a situation where my family could no longer support me financially, and for the first time in my life, I was on my own, with no home to go back to and no money to continue paying for my college tuition or any of my living expenses. So I did what anyone else would do in that situation. I panicked. But after the panic subsided, I began to think a lot more clearly, and probably for the first time in my life, I thought critically about my future and how I was going to get out of this mess. Now, I had some money left over from working campus jobs and summer jobs, but it wasn't much. It was probably around $1,000 or so. So I immediately took out a ton of student loans to pay for my housing and tuition costs, and I also had some family friends that graciously let me stay at their home for the summer after my semester ended. Now, I knew that I would need to get a proper job once I graduated in order to support myself, and in order to do that, I would need to get some internships. The only problem was I had no previous internship experience on my resume at the time because I wasn't really interested in business and finance, and I had no idea you were even supposed to get an internship before your junior year. Luckily though, a good friend of mine told me about a study abroad opportunity in London for the following semester, where for half the time we'd be taking classes, and for the other half we would get to intern at a local company in a field that was business related. So I applied to this program, and I even got a scholarship for it, which actually made it cheaper to spend the semester abroad than on campus. So that was my plan. Even if I couldn't get an internship this summer, I would have some sort of internship by the end of my fall semester, which I could use to potentially get an internship for the following summer. And turns out for that summer, I couldn't get an internship. So I got whatever jobs I could get. Actually, I worked two jobs. One was at an Amazon warehouse where I was paid $18 an hour, which at the time wasn't too bad, but the work was the most excruciatingly mind-numbing work I've ever done. My job was literally to stand at a station, wait for one of those Roomba-looking robots to come to your station with a tower of products, follow the instructions on the screen to pick the products from the tower and put it into a bin. That was it. Just rinse and repeat. You weren't allowed to listen to music or podcasts or anything. You just had to stand at your station and actually time how fast it would take you to pick each item to keep you on track. Anyways, I did that on the weekdays, and then on the weekends, I would work as a guest service attendant at a large concert venue. That job I didn't mind nearly as much because oftentimes I would get to watch the concerts as I was doing my job, so it was actually pretty fun at times. More importantly though, this was a summer that I really started getting interested in finance. Having very little money to my name and thinking about how I was going to support myself financially in the future, I naturally started looking for high-paying finance jobs, and that was when I came across the world of investment banking and trading. At the same time, I felt that grinding away at the warehouse was just way too slow and soul draining, and so I started looking for quicker ways to make money, and one day when I was browsing through YouTube, I came across the world of day trading. Now, you might hear that and laugh, and honestly, looking back, it makes me chuckle thinking that that was part of my introduction to the world of finance. But I will say though, those day traders know how to sell a dream, especially to a broke, desperate college student like myself back then. Needless to say, that didn't work out for too long. Not that I would have been able to make much money with what little money I had to begin with, but I did pick up some of the basics of how the stock market worked, and I was also left with a burning desire to get a job in the financial industry so that I could learn more about the financial markets, but to do it the right way this time. Fast forward to the fall of 2019 and my junior year of college, I was off to London. I had a great time. I absolutely loved living in the city, and I love the city of London itself. There were so many things to do. Although I was traveling on a budget, so I didn't go to some of the more expensive countries like Italy, France, Germany, but instead went to countries like Ireland, Scotland, Slovakia, and Ukraine, which honestly probably made for a more interesting experience. Anyways, as our classes were finishing up, it was time to start looking for internships. Now, the organizers of the program essentially ran us through a matching process where local companies could look through your resume and your profile and reach out to you if they were interested. At the time, my resume basically just had my education, which included my finance degree coursework, and I also had my experience working at my college's television studio, which was probably the most official work experience I had at the time. So there was nothing really finance related, but I did try to emphasize as much as possible my deep interest in the field, and I also tried to emphasize my self-study experience in the written portion of my profile, and yeah, just hope for the best. I had two companies reach out to me. One was a hedge fund auditing firm, which I was super interested in because it had something to do with the hedge fund industry, but the opportunity fell through after they said they weren't looking for an intern anymore. The second was some sort of real estate company, which I wasn't too enthused about, so instead of settling for that one, I actually decided to take the gamble and decline it in the hopes that I would get another opportunity that would have more to do with the financial markets. Now, the semester was quickly coming to a close. All my other classmates had their internships secured, and I was freaking out. Then, just about a week before the end of our semester, another firm reached out to me, and this time it was a small oil derivatives trading / market making firm, and I was overjoyed. The interview was brief. It wasn't really much of an interview at all because it was all part of this matching process. Once I started the job, it was an absolute blast. I didn't have a specific role, but was instead like a Swiss Army knife, doing all sorts of different tasks, working with the CEO and his right-hand man and helping to grow an advisory part of their business that was aimed at giving clients research and analysis into the oil markets, helping them develop hedging strategies, and much more. They had me doing all sorts of different tasks, from doing competitor analysis to creating marketing material like videos and podcasts, to editing market commentary and newsletters, to even doing random intern tasks like getting a specific type of beef jerky that the traders liked. I could care less though. I was just so happy to be there. I would get to attend their daily trader meetings where the traders would talk about all the flows and market dynamics that they're seeing in their respective markets, from crude oil, LNG, naphtha, you name it. I got to hear and experience the buzz on the trading floor as the European markets closed, and this whole experience being in a professional trading setting just made me that much more hungry to get a job in this space. So I started applying like crazy to any sort of finance roles I could find online. I didn't care what part of the bank it was. I just wanted to get my foot inside the door of a large Wall Street bank, and I figured I would worry about the rest later. However, my resume still wasn't the best. I didn't go to a target school, I didn't have an internship from a super recognized company, and I also didn't have a 4.0 GPA. By the way, if you're not familiar with the term, a target school is basically a school where Wall Street firms will recruit directly from your school. So as a result, I only ended up getting 3 interviews. The first one was for an investment banking internship at HSBC, which I didn't end up getting. The second was for a very small hedge fund, which I actually did end up passing the first round. And the third was for a risk management internship at JP Morgan. So I did the online interview for JP Morgan, which included recording myself answering a few questions that they don't tell you beforehand. And it also included some sort of mental aptitude test where they tested you on your mental math and your memory skills and things like that. Anyways, in February 2020, after I was back on campus, I got an email one day saying that I was invited to an interview at the JP Morgan headquarters in New York City. The interview was actually split up into 3 mini interviews where we each talked to 3 different people working in the market risk department at JP Morgan. The market risk department is essentially responsible for monitoring, analyzing, and helping to manage the risks of the trading desks within the bank. The 3 conversations I had went pretty smoothly. They didn't ask me any terribly technical questions, mostly just your typical behavioral type questions. The most difficult question was probably what I thought about the current market environment at the time, which I remember responding by talking about some geopolitical developments like the election at the time and stuff going on in the Middle East. Some of the other candidates weren't quite as lucky though. I remember one guy was asked all sorts of different questions about options and derivatives and all the different Greeks, and I later found out that his interviewer covered nonlinear fixed income products, so that made sense. So a week goes by, I'm in class, and I get a call, and it was the recruiter telling me that I had gotten the internship. And let me tell you, that was one of the happiest days of my life. I was so relieved, but little did I know that was only the end of the beginning. Fast forward to a few months later in the summer of 2020. You're probably thinking, shouldn't there be something happening around?
Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S.
This was an interesting period. Things were incredibly uncertain. We didn't know if the internship would be delayed, if it was going to be online, or if there was even going to be an internship at all. Things were just up in the air, and we expected the worst. And then not too long before the internship was set to start, we got the news. The internship would be cut from 10 weeks to 5, and it would be entirely online. To be honest though, I wasn't too upset about it because even though we weren't going to be able to attend in person, 1, they still paid us for the full 10 weeks, and 2, all I really cared about was getting that return offer, and also not having to pay for housing in the city for those full 10 weeks was pretty nice. The internship started that June. We were put through a brief 2-week training program covering some fundamental markets knowledge, and we had about 3 weeks for their team, in which I was put on the credit trading risk team. Now, because the internship was so short, we didn't have a whole lot of time to work with our team, and instead, most of our time was focused on working on the intern project, which was to basically review the bank's current stress framework in light of the February/March 2020 market crash. By the way, stress tests are an important part of a bank's risk management process, and regulators also use these stress test results to determine if these systemically important banks have enough capital to be able to weather through market crashes or financial downturns. So essentially, I read through the documentation and methodology of how our credit stress tests were designed and came up with a thesis as to whether or not I thought that these stress tests were still effective given this new black swan event that recently occurred. I don't remember the exact details of my presentation, but I remember rehearsing it for a ton, preparing for any potential questions I might get asked, and finally I presented it in front of a panel of more senior people in the department, such as the MDs, the VPs, and associates. They gave me some feedback, some really positive, but there were also some negative feedback as well. But ultimately, the managing directors either liked it or they saw that I had potential, so I got the return offer. Now, fast forward to a year later, it was the summer of 2021. I had graduated college and was living in my new apartment. Before I started full-time though, JP Morgan put me and all the other incoming sales and trading analysts through a training program, which was supposed to be in person, where we would take classes together and then attend occasional evening events. But since we were still somewhat in lockdown, this was done entirely online. The company did end up making up the social parts of the training event a year later, which was a ton of fun. You can check out the video that I did on it here. But basically that summer, it was just 3 weeks of Zoom classes. After the training program, I got placed in the public finance department, which is the first team that I'd be joining as part of the Analyst Rotational program, and as the trading desk that focuses on trading municipal bonds. Now, since I lived in Connecticut at the time and the office was in Midtown Manhattan, every morning I would have to wake up at 5 a.m. and take an hour-and-a-half train ride into the city. And while this commute was pretty brutal, I was so excited because I was working at one of the best financial institutions in the world.
JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase.
And was exactly the dream that I had 2 years earlier. I would go in every morning to attend and take notes for the 7:30 meeting with all the traders and salespeople. I learned how large trading desks manage their interest rate and credit risk. I prepared weekly stress results for the head of the trading desk. I would do pre-trade analysis on the large deals that the desk would bid for whenever a city or a state issued new bonds. I would do research and give presentations on different parts of the municipal market and much more. After the initial excitement wore off though, it began to dawn on me that working at a bank isn't exactly what I thought it'd be. After all, trading desks at a bank just aren't what they used to be like in the 80s or even before the global financial crisis, since regulations prohibit banks from taking on too much risk since they're too important to the global economy. And so I realized what I really wanted to do was to work at a hedge fund where traders could actually take outright directional views of the market. Being only a year into my role though, I wasn't actively looking for new jobs. Plus, my first rotation was coming to an end and I was slated to switch into the equity department, which I was more interested in, so I was looking forward to that. So at that year-and-a-half mark, I finally switched into equities and I was having a good time. I was learning a lot about the different facets of an equity trading desk, all the different products that they trade, how they manage their equity derivative exposure like Delta, Gamma, Vega, Rho, etc. Only a month in, however, I got a message on LinkedIn from a recruiter. Now at this point, I had gotten a ton of different messages on LinkedIn from headhunters, but usually they were for a small firm or the firm would be concentrated in a specific sector or asset class like commodities or something like that I wasn't particularly interested in. But this time it was different. I looked into the company and they were a multi-strategy macro hedge fund with a pretty sizable AUM. Plus they were located in my home state of Connecticut, and by that time living in New York had burned me out and I felt that I could use a change in scenery. But the biggest reason was I thought that this opportunity would give me the chance to learn the most about a number of different markets and perhaps would get me closer to the goal of trading or becoming a portfolio manager myself one day, which was the goal that I had in mind ever since I discovered what the financial markets were 5 years ago. Honestly, I can't even believe I'm saying that 5 years. Wow, time just really flies by. But there you have it. That is my story of how I went from a broke, desperate college kid with simply a newfound interest in finance to where I currently am now working at a hedge fund. Now, there are a lot of things that I would do differently. For example, if I were to do this all over again, I would certainly start looking for internships as soon as my freshman year. But if you're in a similar position as I was, I think there are a few things that you could take away, such as how persistence, casting a wide net, and taking a more unconventional approach can definitely help improve your odds of getting the role that you want. Now, I wanted to share this story in case any of you guys watching might find this helpful, but I myself am still in the early innings of what I hope to be a very long career. So if you're interested in joining me on this journey or in anything else I have to share, then you can subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like. I would really appreciate it. And thanks for watching.